Hello, everyone. Welcome to February 11th, 2025. Today, we have a couple of agenda items. Tim, you're up first.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a couple updates in the in-place resize design that we're planning to make for 133. The biggest one that I think deserves some discussion with this group is around memory limit decreases, which we've presented previously. So we had kind of a lot of back and forth around how to handle memory limit decreases, and I realized that a bunch of the folks I was discussing this with, we weren't all on the same page about what the actual desired outcome is when you're decreasing memory limit below the usage. So if you decrease the limit, the kernel attempts reclaim. What happens if you can't reclaim sufficient memory? I think kind of the two options, what we had discussed previously is we want to just hold the resize in place and say, in progress. So you're trying to decrease the limit below the usage. You can't do that. We'll retry it on the next pod sync. But I think there's also a good argument for, in that case, you actually should kill the container. It's a little more consistent with, if the memory balloons just before, just after the resize. If it's just after the resize, it's always going to get kind of killed outside of Kubernetes control. But ultimately, I think this topic needs a little more discussion. And instead of trying to do, a sort of good enough approach for 133 for beta, I'm worried that if we go with kind of either solution in the short term, customers could start depending on that immediately and lock us into that decision. So I'd prefer to say, you're not allowed to decrease memory limits if the resize policy is prefer no restart. And then we'll reevaluate this in the future when we have a little more concrete idea of the use cases and what customers actually expect, what users expect. So the decision that I'm pushing for 133 is in API server validation. If the resize policy is prefer no restart, you cannot decrease memory limits. You can still adjust memory requests, assuming it's not a guaranteed pod, and you can still increase memory, but we just won't let you decrease the limits. Any questions or concerns about that?
I don't have question. I don't have concern. Also, since you and I already discussed, I agree with you, but I still want to say my opinion. Okay, so originally I'm thinking about so if we just simply check usage, allow this kind of happen, but we simply check the usage is below the limit, then we just okay, and if it's not, just simply reject it. But even that, I understand in some really rare cases, still is not a guarantee. So that's why the concern. And also, but that give us a little bit of room to push harder, work with the kernel community, Linux kernel community, to optimize memory accounting and optimize reclaim logic in the kernel. That's kind of what my original thoughts. Okay, so, but I totally agree. At the end, we back and forth debate, and at the end, I think what team, because since we the policy is prefer no restart, and at this moment, and it's hard to, since we cannot provide guarantee and at all, and even that maybe it's highly possible it could be achieved. So but still it's not guaranteed. So that's why I agree with it. I just share my opinion here. Yeah.
I think this sounds reasonable for now, and then we can always loosen it later, right? If we find a way forward. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, that's the idea, that it will be a lot easier to loosen this restriction in the future than to change the behavior if we, try and do it one way and decide we want the other way.
Do we, just a question, who do we expect the first customer will be? Like, do we get any feedback from SIG, for instance, or like, do we need to go to them?
We already got some feedback, like the GK customer Slab, more than Slab, I think there's the several customer try. They try the feature, they really appreciate the feature. And 1.32 they try, because we inform them. But we think about that can help us to promote this to beta. So all it is positive feedback.
Yeah, I understand the feedback about feature, but like this limitation, will it limit the scenario for the customer or for like many SIG scenarios?
I've talked to some of our PMs who are working on this, and they're going to try to follow up with customers. But the specific, kind of the most common use cases that they're hearing, this won't affect them.
Okay, thank you for confirming.
All right, the other change that I wanted to highlight, I haven't actually pushed this to the KEP yet. I've been kind of going back and forth, but I think I'm settled on it. This was, I think Tim Hawken first raised this. I think I want to move the resize status to pod conditions. So resize status is just an enum in the pod status. That's is the resize, or we're already getting rid of the pending state. So it's like, is it deferred? Is it infeasible? Or is it in progress? Deferred and infeasible are mutually exclusive, but a resize can be both in progress and deferred. It's sort of two different resizes at different states. So that's kind of one reason for separating it out. It also lets us pair a user-facing message with it, which previously we'd been talking about doing in events, but this lets us just put it directly in the pod condition, which will be a little more user-friendly, I think. So the idea is we'll add a new pod condition type, something like resizing or whatever, and then can have reason deferred and feasible. I'm still on the fence of whether we want to add a separate condition to track the in progress state. But yeah, I'll get those updates out soon, and then probably just hold the resize status field back in alpha and then maybe remove it in a later release. Any questions about that one?
I don't have a question on this one. I do prefer, but I saw the API reviewer in the past, generally they don't like any condition. So that's why they want the proper struct status compared to the condition. So that's why it looks like the we turn around, we allow some condition, pod condition, node condition possible, because I feel last couple of years I've been under pressure because I push a lot of condition in the past. And there's the people ask me to come up the way to get rid of those conditions existing or make good condition proper struct status. So that's why I'm a little bit surprised and the condition. Yeah, Yuji.
Yeah, I think similar questions on that is like, do we have more of a guideline of what should be a condition versus API field? I think even like not just like before, but even recently, I think whenever we mention condition, there will always voice saying like, why is this a condition instead of a field? And I've never actually got to have a really great answer for that. So just wanted to see maybe from this conversation, this discussion, at least we get something out of it that we can use in the future.
If either of you have any more context you can share with me offline of like those past discussions, that would be helpful. I think in this particular case, Tim Hawken is the API reviewer for this feature, and he was the one who suggested it. You just suggested it originally, actually. So
we didn't get to that. It's just because we know the API reviewer don't like the condition, like the like recent like node condition for the swap also, right? Because
yeah, I think the problem is one API reviewer will say make it a condition, the other one will say make it a field. So that's why I'm asking this question upfront, so that we don't get into a situation like last minute we still get another different opinion, and then we have to make it a field again.
I do know in this particular case, so there's a lot of other fields in the condition struct, and a lot of those are useful in this case. I just got out of a meeting with the vertical pod autoscaler team, and they were planning to use resize status to see if a pod is stuck in the deferred state for too long, in which case they'll recreate it so it gets rescheduled. And so that idea of like what is too long, the condition includes a last transition time. And so they can use that last transition time instead of having to track internally when it entered that deferred state. So that'll be convenient for them. We already talked about the user-facing message. And also pod generation, which is kept going to alpha, which we've talked about solving the pending case. We're adding separate generation for the conditions as well. So we can use that here too.
Thanks, team.
I think those were the only two updates I wanted to share on this. There's more changes being proposed for 133, but I think we've already discussed most of them here. I guess I don't see it on the agenda. The one other one to highlight is Dixie pushed an update to the pod level resources KEP that includes a proposal for how resize will work for pod level resources.
Tim, also, do you want to mention that you and I discussed we want to turn that bit as early as possible, like the feature get, promote this as early as possible so we have more time to try that testing, not like last time, last minute we change it. Yeah. So we can get more soaking time doing the device.
So so in 132, we made every change that we were planning to make for 132 and then flipped it to beta. And then once it goes to beta, it's default on, and suddenly we're running a lot more CI jobs against it. And we ran into two problems with that. One was a Windows test suite that wasn't running with this in alpha started failing. And then the other was some tests. There was some kind of interaction between tests in the main suite. I think it was specifically the metrics server. There was a race condition with pods getting cleaned up. And then also just tests started timing out because resize adds a lot of new tests. So what I discussed with Dawn is we want to figure out what exactly the beta blockers are, get those done first, but then try and early in the cycle flip it default on so we can get that additional test coverage as we make those final changes. And if something comes up later in the release, we can always roll that back. Also, as other changes are coming in that this could potentially interact with, it'll help catch those issues earlier.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else on those?
I think that's all I had on this topic.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Francesco.
Hello. So I will be very quick, unless there are questions, of course, which we'll be very happy to answer. So we have this contributor which created this PR for a very old issue, which is about CPU quota rounding errors, which could cause throttling for when CPUs are exclusively allocated, which is a scenario which is, as you can easily guess from and tell and see from the linked issue, which affects quite heavily a very, very narrow set of users. But those users are quite a bit in pain because of this. So this contributor created a nice PR. It went through a lot of review, a lot of back and forth, and I would like to see some more progress. So from my side, looks good, and people please have a look so we can make progress. Thank you.
Yeah, I reviewed it before, and I think all my comments were resolved, so I will take a look today.
Thank you very much.
If anybody has opinion, please speak up. Otherwise, I think it will be approved today.
I have a comment about the feature gate. The introduction of feature gate here is a bit unconventional. So I would suggest that we agree on, a time frame where the feature gate would be removed, kind of set a checkpoint for ourselves to evaluate, that now is a good enough time to perhaps remove this feature gate if everything works as expected.
Typically for bug fixes, which potentially can break somebody, we follow the beta enabled by default, and if we have no feedback, next or release after the next, we'll remove it. Next release may be a little bit tight, but we will probably wait for 2 releases.
I think that's fair, given that there's no cap really tracking this particular feature gate. That's why I'm essentially mentioning that we should have a milestone for us. I think 1 release, 2 release, I'm okay with anything that we agree on essentially.
Do you expect any specific scenario when it will fail and cause major problem for customers? Because I don't see how it's I see how it may affect people. I don't see how people will heavily depend on this behavior.
So, but Sergey, no matter what, I think the Swati suggests the good policy. Maybe Swati or maybe Sergey, one of you document what we agree. Right.
Yeah, I will probably asking to say delete in 136, right? 6 or 5. Yeah, 2 releases.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think if I understand correctly, and probably Francesco can answer the question that you asked a bit better, but I believe the reason we introduce FeatureGate is in case people rely on, the legacy way of allocation and CPU quota. So we want to have a way to support people who are surprised by this new change.
Yes, that's exactly the point. I think everyone agreed that this is an issue, meaning a bug, meaning we need a fix. But this was very, very, very old behavior. So in order to be super, super careful to not break everyone, I actually suggested to add a feature gate like we had for fixes. I think I asked for the removal date, but I'm looking at the code right now and it is not. So thank you for pointing out. I'm adding a comment today to request for, hey, let's remove it in 35 or so. So when that is updated, I guess we are kind of in agreement to move forward. Is my understanding correct?
That's right. Yeah, that sounds good.
Fair enough. Thank you for raising. Very good point.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. If there's nothing else there, we can move on to Adrian.
Yeah, hi. So I think my question or my point is also solved. You added yourself as a reviewer. It was just unclear what the state of my cap was. There was an approver assigned, but nothing else last time. So I was just wanted to bring it up once more to make sure it's in the correct state.
Really, thank you. Yeah, I'll take a look at it today.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you. All right, and then finally, I have one which is just poking folks about SwapCap. Itamar has updated it with all of my comments, and I think all that have been outstanding. I think one note through the comment process, at the beginning of this set of changes, the proposal was to have the when calculating eviction thresholds, just use the memory limit as the total amount of memory that the container swapless memory is being compared to, which would sort of skew in favor of evicting swapping pods because they're more likely to be going over the limit. Through a discussion, we have decided to just treat swap plus memory as the limit. So the accessible amount of swap plus the memory limit, that's the amount of swap plus memory that'll be compared against when evaluating the current memory usage and figuring and like ranking the pods. But other than that, I think we've talked about all of these things. So would love it if Sergey or Don could take a look at this from who was assigned to the board.
I will take a look today. And the last time I did a look at the eviction logic. I'm okay, but again, I just want to see the testing result to some extent. I think, but the logic actually looks good to me. Let me follow up with the AJ, right? So of 9, since he also doing something with the swap, and maybe I can see that from the design.
Yeah, and if there's and if there's any sort of testing that can happen, that especially like there might not be enough time before TEF freeze, but like testing specifically we can do before implementation gets merged that like you want to see, let us know, and then we can sort of play around with it.
Totally. Yeah.
Edmar, I think you have a hand first.
We cannot hear you.
Yeah, you're muted. Totally. I guess we can. Sergey, did you want to ask your question, or do you want to wait till Edmar gets back?
I can ask
Can you
my
hear me now?
Maybe you haven't. Oh. Edmar?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear.
Great, sorry for that. I just wanted to mention that I already have a PR with the previously suggested approach. It's not, before Peter's comments. It already has like E2E tests over there. So just wanted to mention that.
When you reiteration of that, when you say you have a PR with that, do you mean you have a PR and you tested it and like you have some test results as Don asking, or you just have a PR and like it works on tests?
First of all, I wrote like E2E testing in the PR itself. It seems to have tested multiple times, repeatedly. Another thing is that we've in Red Hat we've been testing this approach for a while. So it's not exactly the same approach that we're talking about in the recent CAP update, but it's very similar. Yes, I think we have confidence in this. Also, if we will graduate, it will only be to beta 3, and I assume that for GA we would need to see this, constantly green.
Also, Itamar, just prove your another cap about the sysinfo, about the swap. I guess so. There's the other comment will come back maybe. So that's why I feel we discussed last week at the SIG Node, right? So that's why I approve that first. Hopefully, there are people want to change the mind, want to go back to the node condition. We still have the time to get that to change. So that's why I took that first. Just making you know. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. We had a long history with that. I mean, whatever people prefer. I just remember that there was a really big pushback about conditions. But yeah, I'm happy to rediscuss this.
We can come back to the condition. So that's why I give you a little bit buffer time.
So I think I can go next. For swap specifically, I think last time we discussed it on this meeting, we talked about it's still unclear like whether current API approach with swap being evenly distributed on non-guaranteed pods is what we'll have long term. And every question about like how to expose this information, how to like where to know about swap is basically coming back to the discussion how we'll move forward. And I think Ronald was mentioning that we may want it for guaranteed pod very soon. And like if we do, then like how do we even move forward out of what we have today? APIs that is heavily relying on how like Node is configured is very unintuitive. It only supports like subset of scenarios when you don't really care about swap. You just care that there is just a little bit of swap available. So kind of optimization scenarios. Did we follow up on that? Like, did we continue discussion on API longevity and maybe pass forward from current scenarios to scenarios like extended scenarios that we want to support?
Yeah, I mean, so we've talked about this a few times before. So from my perspective, the thing is that this is not very easy to accomplish because there are a lot of different use cases, and there are two assumptions here. So the first of all, like in most cases, in the vast majority of cases, the user will not be requesting swap directly on the one hand, and it is also dangerous to allow every user to do so. On the other hand, you're right, we need to be customizable and support multiple use cases. So my thinking was that this cap, which is already graduating to beta 3, is a basic swap enablement. My thoughts were to start a follow-up cap right after this one to discuss customizations and APIs and stuff like that. We've intentionally did not introduce any APIs because it's so controversial, and this is already a long-running cap. So in my opinion, we should do that in a follow-up because yeah, I mean, we don't want to reach like beta 10 with this. That's my opinion.
I mean, we can always go beta 0, like alpha, and remove it. If approach going forward, like once we GA it, next step will be strip it out and have a completely new APIs, and it's not worth to GA this feature. But I understand where you're coming from. I don't mean to say that it's wrong API. I just don't know what scenario is coming immediately after that.
Right.
If you can continue, yeah, I think this beta you concentrate on eviction, right? So this is like what we okay, makes sense for me.
I think that can I rephrase what you ask? I think if I understand what you ask correctly, you want to ensure of this current the GA to be GA the API extensible, so we could relatively smooth the move to expand it to support the most use cases instead of like they say, oh, we have to clean up the already GA the API, or maybe have document all those kind of things and make this APIs look ugly. I think that's what you ask for. So maybe Itama, maybe we put some thoughts about that one, how we are going to expand it potentially that can answer, like satisfy the community and especially Sergey's uncertainty, right? So that's like we will agree to GA the node swap API separated from the rest of the pod specific swap use cases. We did agree, and this will take a long time. And also many people are using this feature. So that's why I think about community, including myself, do have incentive to graduate this to GA. But I think about the circuit bringing the right perspective, right? So for community, for longer term, yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that I don't think that what will happen next is that we will, take everything we've built and, remove it in order to introduce something else. Right now, we have the concept of swap behaviors, and we basically have two swap behaviors. One of them is no swap, so nothing. The other one is limited swap. what I think of is that in a follow-up cap, we can introduce more swap behaviors, which will maybe result in expanding the pod API or something like that. But I mean, I see it as just incremental steps, and as you said, like there are many users to this already, and I think it would benefit everyone to just, you know, have a basic feature out there with the intention to extend it, and you know, there's already the basic ground to do so, in my opinion.
Mike, you've been patient. You want to go?
Yeah, sure. I just was taking a look at the forensic stuff. We talked a long time ago about the possibility of extending past the forensics case into just really sort of understanding it. And I still have a little bit of a concern in sensitive environments doing, you know, serialization of the data that is in containers, like a banking environment, right, or finance, government, for example. So in those environments, the root owner is probably not the person that has access to the data that's being run in the containers. So I think we need a little bit more thought there, just with respect to defining the documentation and maybe adding an encryption feature to the use cases, just so that we can, you know, isolate. You know, this is in a sensitive environment, so you're on a cloud and you don't want to do this necessarily out of hand, or if you do, it needs to be in an encrypted way, right? Just pointing that out.
Totally. I would, let's circle back to this because that's stepping back a little bit. And so let's finish up swap, but I do want, like, we can talk about that. I just want to tie up the swap conversation and we can move back, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Mernal.
Yeah, so I think on the swap topic, I agree. I think what we should do is we can proceed with this one, but let's also start making a use cases document and make sure it's in an order of what's most important to tackle next. In the original document, we had like two categories, like protecting the system and protecting the workloads part of it, and then like start expanding the use cases in those two buckets. To ensure that like the API changes we are making are going to be extensible. So I'm in agreement with Sergey to make sure that we start that in parallel. And Sergey, I'm assuming you have something more on swap, then I can go back to Mike's suggestion.
Yeah, I just wanted to reply on swap APIs and like how it may not be very convenient for people whenever we have a kind of configuration on a node saying like, oh, this node is behaving differently regarding to swap, it's really hard for users to utilize that because they just operate with pods. They schedule pods specific way, and then if nodes somehow managed by somebody else, they have no idea how to work and how to be behaving. So yeah, I agree that this swap enables very good scenarios for just give me a little bit swap. I have a bunch of Java applications and I don't want to use all the memory because like there is a bunch of classes being JIT compiled and I never use those classes. So this is very legitimate scenarios, but then any advanced scenarios, if people will start utilizing this way and then like we will ask them to change it, like we need to think about those transitions.
Sergey, but do you agree that, in essence, this could be tackled in a follow-up? I definitely agree that I should start working on that follow-up right away and present a sketch of it. But do you agree that we need to separate between those gaps?
As long as we understand that, like, let's say eviction, like we work on eviction, we say eviction assumes that this is how it's distributed, but then like immediately after that we say like, but for like guaranteed pods, eviction will not work this way. So two logics of evictions for different type of swap enablement sounds like a overkill, and then how people will like how we expose metrics and not conditions. Like, is it the not condition all the time, or it's sometimes the resource that is being utilized by like counted resource and you don't have any need for eviction? That is completely different story, right? So we need to yeah, I guess I just want to see how we will move forward. Some ideas like this is what we'll enable in future. And if you decide we don't want to enable any other advanced scenarios, everything will be just like pre-configured for you and you shouldn't care about it. And we'll leave that way next 5-10 years, it's also fine with me. We just need to work on decision.
But Sergey, actually, the eviction logic, I understand it's not perfect. This is why I keep keen on the eviction management. Last time I even blocked this one, but that's implementing detail. It's not API expansion. I just want to mention that we definitely need later doing the development and the test, all those kind of things. We still could block this graduate to GA if it's not the test result doesn't say the good result, right? So cost damage more than bring the value to the users. But I'm not concerned because API graduation on this eviction manager perspective part. And then later we cannot expand it, we cannot move forward. I'm not concerned that part. I just want to clarify here. This is why eviction manager, I do hope I can see the test result more details and to demonstrate that one. But I kind of from the high level algorithm, they prove that it makes sense. I want to move forward on the type, but there's no API involved. At least this is my standard. Okay, please.
Yeah, so I'll start a sketch right away for that. Yeah, we'll be able to discuss it and regarding the different kinds of eviction for different swap behaviors. So I mean, I kind of think it's a valid thing to do, because if pods have different access to swap, then I think that maybe we should have different eviction. And as Don said, this is only an implementation detail that the user doesn't even need to be concerned about that. But yeah, I'll let me start a sketch and we'll continue the discussion there.
User management.
I will say
us because we build the eviction management mess up. They believe other jobs should be evicted, but we evicted their job. They will mad at us. The only problem, only things I want to say that it is, but at least not generate compatibility issue. So we will treat it as the bad implementation or bug we need to handle, and that's kind of what I want to say here. But again, we need to see the test result, generate more test scenario and see that. Then at the end, last minute, we still could flip this one. It's not GA, right? So if the implementation really cannot convince us it's GA quality, we still can do that.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Do we have anything else on swap? If not, we can loop back to the forensic checkpointing. Oh, Renal, and
Yeah, so this is for checkpointing. So like I think it may not be too bad to have a way to disable it or make it opt-in to SUH Mike's concern. I don't know, like Don, Adrian, what do you think?
Yeah, so leaving it at beta would mean it's opt-in basically or opt-out, so you can still disable it. I guess doing.
No, I mean like at GA we want to like have a flag. So
Okay, yeah,
if
sure.
someone wants to disable it, they can disable it or enable it.
Yeah, sure. So are there any other features who can be enabled, disabled like that? So just curious if this is the normal approach, or if this needs extra infrastructure to have, I don't know, extra code or
Security context, you can have one or not on a pod, right? We suggest you do, but right. So I think your use case is fine.
It's a little bit different though, because in the case where like an admin wanted to disable checkpointing, it would have to be an API server and qubit, or I guess at least APIs. Well, no, because it's not through the API, so it'd have to be a qubit field. Like there's not a way currently to make it so that a user cannot or must specify a security context. It's like an optional thing. But in the case of forensic checkpointing, if an admin wanted to disable it, they would have to be able to have a way to express no users may checkpoint. on this cluster.
So I prefer default. This is off.
Yeah, I think yeah, exactly. That makes sense. Default to off, and then admins can opt in, and I think everyone is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that works.
We already have an RBAC rule, I think, for the kubelet level. Is that a
No,
good
I think
enough?
that's like just an onion. I think, Adrian, I think in some situations folks just don't want to enable it at all. And for them, we give them this hammer where like, okay, it's not enabled. You have to opt in, and there is RBAC for further protection. But I don't think yet RBAC is enough to assuage those concerns.
We can add it to on a pod spec level later with subsequent caps. That would be fine, right?
So one question. If the default off, so this going to be only like the Kubernetes config, not API server, right? Just Kubernetes config. And so is that true? Oh, that's I want to ask. So okay.
I think so, because there's no API awareness right now. So API server isn't even aware that checkpoint is possible.
Okay. Okay.
One more question: is this normally a thing which is which you have to toggle on start, or is this a runtime flag? I guess it's
start, not runtime. Yeah, it's something you have to configure before you start the kubelet.
Okay.
Yeah, you just restart the Kubernetes, because anyway, right now it's a node feature, right? So once we need to discuss about the API, right? So that's the last time we talk about this one. So once we have the API, then we can talk about how to enable this best. This is also a reason I want to know that by default it is off. Even it's GA node feature, people want to using, so they can explicit state they enable this one. But for people don't expect using this one, then they just don't aware of those kind of things, right? So not changing deployment.
Right, and we can talk about in the documentation for the where that is, that we can explain why you would want it to be on and how that would work and what are the risks so that they're not surprised, right?
Is there any other feature which is handled like that? Just that I have something to look at.
We do have a feature like that, but I forgot at this moment.
Okay.
We have 10 years, so we definitely have some default off feature before. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I actually don't remember many features like that. Maybe there is one. But do we do the same for SSH, for instance, to the pods? Like if a customer wants to disable SSH to the pod, they just do RBAC for this, right? We don't have like disabling it. And also like if we don't disable CRI calls, and customer can SSH to the node or have some CRI API, like socket permissions, and then they can still checkpoint this way. Like I don't really see the big point of disabling API by default and having this like bad scenario for customer, bad experience for customer. There is an API, but it doesn't work because cluster configured it this strange way.
It's a privacy concern. It's an access to the data concern. We're not just talking about serializing the code so it can restart. Once it's serialized, you have access to social security numbers, finance information, all the detail. And if it's not encrypted in memory, it's not encrypted on disk. So there's a security concern. That's all.
So this
I'm
is
with you on like the danger of that, but I don't know like whether kubelet config is
and you can edit the data and then restore it. Let's put it that way.
Totally. So this is why we want to user explicit to say, I want this feature. Right? So this is node feature. Anyone have that node access could be abusively to leverage this feature, do something. So that's why
you can use the feature for good to find attacks, or you could edit a file and become the attack. And that's a concern.
Totally. And so basically I want admin, cluster admin, because they have the power to restart the Kubernetes, right? To configure node config. So that's why I want that explicit statement. So that's as simple as this, right? So that's why I want the default off. I don't want to give community, we a trouble if I'm thinking about security concern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will be the
And
same.
we have a log of the config for kubelet, right? So yeah, okay.
Can we achieve the same with different kind of APIs? My biggest concern is that if it's kubelet config, then it's kind of like nuclear option, and then experience on on consumer side is quite complicated. Like if we want to enable it for specific nodes, and like customer will need to go through so many hoops to jump and like disable it.
Well, do you have a less complex user scenario where the checkpoints will be used? It's not in the, there is no use case, this a less complex use case right now in the CAP.
Sergey, this is why we want to simplify user experience. We start talking about the real API, right? Once the real API, then that's the admin and approval. Then we can talk about more at the cluster level, security, access, all those kind of things. At this moment, that's just node feature. And so that's why we want to make sure and the people have the access to that node, not abuse this feature, and then security concern. So that's the reason.
Okay. I think another comment would be like maybe container runtimes should also provide this feature, and like maybe you need to disable it even lower levels than this. Than Kubernetes.
One way is to not have CRY-U on the machine.
Yeah, but then you can again leave it on in the kubelet. So because if you have it on a machine, you can always go to containerd and request a checkpoint. So
It's true.
so having it disabled in the kubelet doesn't give you anything really from a security point of view.
We can make that point too in the CAP with default off. We could recommend the default off on the container runtime and check that.
Yeah, I don't think containerd has the option to turn it off right now. So you would need to do that also, right? Yeah.
So it's I believe it's maybe Samuel correct me and Mac correct me. It's the same concept by default. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I really like what you got going on, Adrian, especially as an experimental development, feature. And I'd like to see it go GA as well. I just, in a public scenario or even private, where they may not want that admin to have access to the content. Just a little concern. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks.
So did anyone else have anything they wanted to talk about?
Okay, reasons in 2 days. So yeah.
Yeah, lots of caps in flight. So we'll get what we can. Great.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention some admin tasks, like we migrating mailing lists from Google Groups to Kubernetes.io domain. Already done. You all, if you were an old group, you already were merged automatically, like migrated automatically. I will send notifications later this week.
Great, thank you, Sergey.
Thanks.
Great, thanks everyone. Talk to you later.